Hello everyone, welcome back to Joe Talks Politics. I am your host, Joseph Musia. Over the past few weeks, we've had a number of major changes on the South African political scene. And while many of us have been concentrating on the government of national unity, there have been major changes in the legislative sector as well. Parliament has got a new speaker. We've got a new chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, and they also have new deputies. We have had the DA joining up with the ANC now, and we actually have a new official opposition in the form of Jacob Zuma's party, Umkhonto weSizwe. But to take us through these changes and whether we are moving in the direction, the correct direction as a country, we've invited veteran journalists of many years, of over 30 years experience as a journalist, and most of that career being as a parliamentary correspondent for also various publications. We've got with us Marianne Merten. She, as I said, she's got quite a lot of experience, and what I also know about her, she's a stickler for the details of what Parliament does and what is the correct procedures and all that. So I'm extremely excited because she's also my very first guest on this show. And we're hoping that she will be opening doors for many more to come through. And before we waste any time, let's get right into it. Welcome, Marianne, and thank you very much for agreeing to be our first guest. We are quite excited to have you here.
First of all, thank you very, very much for inviting me. It's a privilege, and I'm delighted.
I admire your knowledge of Parliament and the political scene and what happens here. Let's get right into our topic for today. Quite a lot of changes in Parliament itself. We've got new people coming in. What do you think of Parliament and how it has been going so far?
You know what? One of the interesting moments for me, and I think it can be used as an image because it represents quite a lot about Parliament, is when the National Assembly sat in a tent in a parking lot. Yes, it was called the marquee, and all the security measures and everything was taken, so all the pomp and ceremony was there. But really, for Parliament to be sitting in a tent in the marquee is an image that I don't think anybody of us thought would ever happen. And part and parcel of the reason that this is happening is because after the January 2022 fire, it is only now, in the middle of 2024, that the renovations and the work to rebuild Parliament is finally properly unfolding. And it's taken this long, and people would think like, but how do you just not do anything about your national legislature quicker? And I think some of the delays and the processes are very reflective of Parliament. Parliament takes time. Some people would say extraordinarily, unnecessarily long times, because if you look at the Constitution, Parliament is here to be the voice of the people. And for Parliament to sit in a tent, okay, let's call it a marquee, on a parking lot, is kind of reflective that when you don't look after yourself and you don't get to act speedily to repair the National Assembly, which is where the representatives of the public are sitting to be the voice of the people, it's not the best possible scenario. And for me, I'm a bit sad about it, I'm going to be honest.
And it is one thing to sit outside of the premises of Parliament because we've had a fire, but it is the changing and chopping. One time we're sitting at the City Hall in Cape Town, the next we are at the Cape Town Convention Center, and then, as you say, we're sitting in the marquee. Would it have been a little better in terms of the way it looks if perhaps they had gone to one venue and stuck to that venue for all the major events, or are the issues of finance determining everything?
You know, I'm going to just be a spoke in the wheel. I really do think that Parliament should have moved much faster, restored Parliament. It is the national legislature. I mean, I know these comparisons were made in the process, so I'm going to go to Paris, to the Notre Dame, which burned down. It's taken forever and a year to rebuild that cathedral, but very quickly money was allocated, contractors were appointed, the work got going. Why? Notre Dame in Paris are synonymous like the Louvre in Paris, and it was a national importance. Now for Parliament, and yes, we are in a very difficult economic situation, so let's not minimize that. But for nothing to have been done literally for 2.5 years for the national legislature, I think just kind of sends the wrong signals. It sends the signals that Parliament isn't important, that Parliament can make do.
When we move on about the political situation in Parliament itself, Jacob Zuma's MK party is now the official opposition. What do you think of that?
Look, I mean, coming back to, and this is why I started off with Parliament sitting in a marquee in a tent. It's topsy-turvy. It's a sign for me, one, about how Parliament is viewed by many. You know, we have a thing that the presidency is more important. But like you said just now, also it's topsy-turvy in the sense that we've come out of an extraordinary election, the 29th of May election this year. And yeah, we no longer have the DA as the official opposition. And remember, I mean, they were literally sitting in the opposition benches since before 1994, if one goes back and takes the example of the Democratic Party, Helen Suzman, you know, the Democratic Party was one of the DA constituency parts. So it's a huge change. I'm intrigued and I'm pickled by the new leader of the official opposition. I'm intrigued by the new official opposition. It's going to be a huge test. As far as I can see, no one, or maybe just a handful of the official opposition has any parliamentary experience. So there is a dearth of institutional experience. And you will remember, in many ways, the official opposition, the largest party on the opposition benches, the leader of the official opposition, play a significant role in the life of Parliament. Even if it's just to set the debates. I mean, if you go back, for example, when Tony Leon was the DA official leader of the DA leader who served as the official leader of the opposition in Parliament, very often, I mean, you get the most speaking time in debates, and even, you know, you set the tone. You can set the tone.
And now we have an opposition leader from a party that actually does not believe in the constitution as we have it now. And he's a former judge who does not believe in the laws or the type of law that he was practicing. It's quite interesting. I mean, John Chopper was removed a few months ago by Parliament. He's now a member of Parliament. He's not just a member of Parliament, he's the leader of the opposition. He's not just the leader of the opposition, he is going on to become a member of the Judicial Service Commission that removed him as a judge. It's quite bizarre, isn't it?
Oh, it's completely bizarre. And it's one of those things that, as an outsider, people would look at that and say, how is this possible? Now, we've heard the explanations. We've heard the explanations from the ANC chief whip, who voted to support Dr. John Hlophe to be part of the Judicial Services Commission. We've had others saying, but there's nothing in law that says he can't. And yes, it's true. It's absolutely true. There's nothing in law or the constitutions that says you must be a fit and proper person, you can't. But the point is that just because something doesn't say you can't do it, does not mean you do it. There are considerations about ethics, there are considerations about good governance. You cannot operate, and those are codified. You might not have a sentence in a law or an ethics act for Parliament, but there are codified principles and that should matter. And in this case, as you correctly said, they didn't matter. And it's a fallback situation to say, well, there's nothing in law or constitution that says it's not possible, so it can be done. And for me, all of this coming back, Parliament sitting in a marquee in a parking place, also state capture. It's almost as if very little or anything has been learned, because that was precisely also what ran through Parliament in the state capture years. So you would know when the official opposition, then the DA, would bring some of the news reports, be that the Gupta leaks, hashtag Gupta leaks, be that some of the initial reports, for example, Fikile Mbalula, the Sunday Times in 2013, I believe, when they wrote the story about how he was told from the Gupta brothers that he was going to be made a minister. Those things were brought to Parliament largely by the opposition, and it was wiped off the table to say, but we can't take media reports seriously, and we can't do this, and it doesn't say that we have to do this. And it literally took until the middle of 2017 before an institutional directive was given. I think it was the House Chairperson of Committees, Cedric Froelich, who then wrote to the 4 committees, Transport, Public Enterprises, Mineral Resources, and Home Affairs, to say, please, now look at all these claims. At that time, literally, I think Parliament's hands were forced, because you recall that time. It was literally every day, wherever you open a newspaper, I'm giving away my age, or you click on an online media publication, that's what was reported about. And it had been literally dismissed for such a long time until this moment. Now, coming back, sorry, I'm giving you the long answer, but coming back to Dr. John Hlophe, and we're basically in the same situation. Suddenly that stuff that is meant to be important, ethics, good governance, transparency, responsiveness, all of that suddenly, our constitutional values and our constitutional preamble, all of that is then suddenly, no, there's nothing that says that can't be done, so it can be done. When patently, it's bizarre.
Parliament has now restarted and quite a lot has happened. What did you think of the process of passing the budget? Well,
to put it bluntly, I really don't think that any oversight has been done. What do you do if you have one committee meeting on Zoom? You might hear from the minister to say X, Y, Z, this is what we're doing. And how do you have qualitative oversight in one committee meeting? Whether that's 2 hours or 6 hours, it's our budgets are incredibly detailed. We've got the audit, we've got reports from the Auditor General, we've had in the end of last year, we had the BRRR recommendations, which is the budget report and review recommendations, which basically told ministers, this is what we as committees would like you to do. Please respond to us. So what do you do in one committee meeting? And it's more the kind of performative oversight.
Yeah, but, and so, sorry to interrupt you, but many of those meetings were not even completed, because as they were still sitting, you had other committees waiting outside, knocking on the door because they wanted to start their own meetings.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better. So look, I mean, I'm sure the ministers will be absolutely delighted, because they've basically escaped difficult questions. Unless Parliament catches up, and there is a process that will unfold when they return from their constituency period in recess, I'm trying to be polite here about this. So look, as far as I'm concerned, the red flags are raised.
Another matter that worries me is the question arose again about oversight of the presidency by Parliament for all the monies that the president spends in his office. And the explanation that was given by the president himself, he dedicated quite some time in the reply to the presidency's budget vote to try and deal with this matter, and said, no, Parliament has gone through the process and found nothing or found it unnecessary to have. What's your take on that particular response by the president?
It's very clever. And it's very astute. I looked at it and I looked at it again. To use Parliament's report on that study trip to Westminster, and then kind of put a little bit of a dig in to say, well, I would have liked for the MPs to actually go to a few African countries and elsewhere. Look, it was very clever, it was very smooth, but it absolutely completely misses the point. Yes, the president is here. He comes every quarter and answers questions. Everything is scripted. The interesting bits, as you would know, come out in the unscripted questions and the follow-up questions. So to say that the president accounts to Parliament, in a very technical way, he comes here every quarter, yes, tick, there's a session in Parliament, in the House, in the National Assembly, questions are answered. President Cyril Ramaphosa has, for example, submitted the state capture report to Parliament. Yes, there were other reports that were submitted to Parliament, but that's not really oversight or accountability. And Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, as head of the State Capture Commission, was very specific. He said that Parliament should consider an oversight committee over the presidency for those functions for which that are not covered by any other committee. So, for example, let's go in, because the president in his budget speech and made quite a big deal out of Operation Vulindlela, who've been doing amazing stuff. Don't misunderstand. But if you take a step back and take a view as Parliament and constitutional oversight, who oversees Operation Vulindlela? Nobody. And they have had major policy reform initiatives. So, for example, June 2021, there's an announcement that the threshold for the licensing threshold for embedded power generation is now lifted to 100 megawatts. It's a major policy reform. It didn't go through a white paper process. It wasn't even really discussed in the Mineral Resources and Energy Committee, as it was known then. It was an announcement. Operation Vulindlela driven. It was a very timeless announcement. It has made an incredible impact. Ultimately, there's now no longer any threshold in licensing. It has allowed companies and mines to do their own so the impact has been good. However, from a governance and from a parliamentary perspective, nobody came to account. How do you account on Operation Vulindlela impact and functioning on the scarce skills visa? Yes, you can get the DG from Home Affairs, you can get the Minister from Home Affairs, you can get the officials from Home Affairs to come and account to Parliament. But in that delegation, you will not have anybody from Operation Vulindlela. And the brains and the preparation and the policy decisions are made in Operation Vulindlela. And from a parliamentary oversight perspective, there needs to be actually a committee that oversees that. We have, it's one of the things I am deeply concerned about. We have the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence. The intelligence is now within the presidency. Minister Nchabeni is in charge of that. It could very well be that she regularly meets the JSCI. We don't know. It's everything secret. The JSCI has failed for many years, going back to when Cecil Burgess was the chairman of the JSCI, has failed to produce on time the annual reports that are required by the law that has established the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence as the only parliamentary committee established by an act. And again, the institution of Parliament, of the National Assembly, has let that slip. So those are the kind of things where a presidency committee would be required. And, maybe MPs of what used to be the governing party, the ANC, which is now part of the Government of National Unity, maybe there still is a sentiment that, maybe one doesn't want to have the president himself appear before the committee. From what I understood, it's a long-standing call. Somebody else can come. Where does the Director General of the Presidency, Pindila Baleni, where does she account to? And the DG in the Presidency, as you would know, they've been changes. So she is now the DG for the whole of the public service, actually the head of the public service, as they called it. So there's an involvement also if there's a dispute with the DG, maybe at another department. It all goes through the presidency. All these things go through. And where do they account to? And given the extensive powers that reside in the presidency these days, I don't think it's an issue that Parliament can yet put to rest.
Yeah, there are many people in the country who were, including myself. I was one of those when it became clear that the ANC was not going to be able to form a government on its own for the sake of stability politically in the country, for the sake of economic stability in terms of investors' confidence. I was one of those who called on the DA and the ANC to put aside their differences and work together so that we can, ANC in spite of all the corruption that we can talk about that was there, and all the wrong things and misrule and everything that you can, they provided stability by the fact that people knew who the government was and everything. You had that, but the changes needed to come because people were unhappy about things. Now the DA is part of government, and the DA, one of the things they have in abundance is research capacity in terms of holding ministers to account and all that. The other opposition parties do ask relevant questions as well. It's not but that research capacity of the DA in terms of holding the government to account is going to happen less now because they've got ministers in government that also need to account to Parliament on a number of issues. Do you think that this is likely to weaken opposition in terms of oversight?
It's a fascinating question because, you know what, I think some of the tensions and some of those dynamics that you've just sketched out were so visible in both the debate on the opening of Parliament, but also on the presidency budget speech, budget vote, sorry. And it's something that they're going to have to really think about how to do, because those DA speeches, when they were the official opposition, they were loud, they were tough, they were high. And I'm going like, hang on, what happened here? They're really nice. Oh, okay. So even when some of the DA speakers in those key debates that we've seen recently, where Parliament is the center of such national debate, even when they were making critical points, it was very politely put. And I'm thinking, okay. At the same time, of course, I mean, Parliament is also, so there's a how do we deal with this, and how, I think they're still finding their feet. I don't think, I'm not quite sure that I would say that research capacity might not be there anymore. I think it will be there, and I think it might be used differently.
Yes, it's now used to support the government instead of criticizing the government.
Yes, but look, it's one of those things that we've seen. I mean, we now have an ANC chief whip who continues to be called the chief whip of the majority party because Parliament has not yet amended the rules. I'm coming back to the image, and I know it's possibly repetitive, but I'm coming back to the image of the National Assembly sitting in a marquee on the parking lot. Those things should not take this long to resolve, but it's certain protocols and certain ways of doing, because they haven't been challenged for so long. As you said, the ANC brought stability. It was always going to be an ANC chief. The ANC always won the elections significantly enough to always form the government by themselves. So there was never any need. And some of this weird protocol just fossilized, and now when you need to be quick and fleet-footed, it's like we need to change the rules, and there's a level of paralysis, and it doesn't reflect a Parliament, MPs, an institution that is responsive and accountable. Qualitative oversight must happen for your sake, for my sake, for people who live in informal settlements and are wondering what has happened to the housing budget. For the grannies and the aunties that have to go queue at 4 o'clock at the clinic in order to stand a chance because the clinic says, yeah, sorry, first 50 people done, that's it, we're full of the day, come back tomorrow. Because either there's not enough nurses, or there's not enough doctors, or there's not enough medicines, or maybe because people just got so used to that this is the system, they don't want to do it any other way. So that oversight is for people who elected these MPs. And sometimes that needs to be repeated ad nauseum, I think. There are tens of millions of South Africans out there that depend on this parliament to do oversight, to make sure that 123 million rand are not spent on farms and luxury cars, but are spent on national skills funding.
The last thing we're going to talk about is the media.
Yeah.
The media plays quite an important role in Parliament, and asking some of those questions that perhaps maybe opposition parties are not asking. What's your take on the level of probing that the parliamentary media does in terms of holding Parliament itself as well as government to account?
Ministers knew before the January 2022 fire that when they came to Parliament to account in the House, to committees, but also to journalists who were attending those committees in person, because they no longer had that structure that they may have in Pretoria of gatekeepers. So parliamentary media played an incredibly important role, because we could doorstep ministers, we could ask questions, we could doorstep DGs, we could ask questions. A lot of that unfortunately fell away, one, during the COVID lockdowns, and as South Africa started getting back to normal, Parliament did not get back to normal because the fire in January 2022 destroyed the National Assembly wing. So ministers these days are more likely to have a media conference in Pretoria or Johannesburg. The journalists who attend do not necessarily know how laws are made, how governance works. You know, the stuff that the Parliamentary Press Gallery Association members deal with on a daily basis. When you are in the PGA, you are a senior journalist. You know how laws are made. You know how government works. You know the interaction between political parties. And let's be honest, all political parties have their caucuses, their tensions and everything, and how that impacts, right? In Pretoria, that is not there. And dialing into a media conference is not the same thing, because the ministers and the officials can kind of skirt, because they know, oh God, there's somebody from the PGA, that's going to be a difficult question. Let's just skim it. So in many ways, the setup of Parliament right now is that the opportunities to get answers without gatekeepers has been minimized. And that in itself is not necessarily a good thing for oversight and accountability, unfortunately.
That's where we end it. Thank you so much, Marianne. I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much. It has been my absolute pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.